What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about what you should do if you struggle with route running. So we're going to be covering everything that you need to know about route running, and this is going to improve your overall game as a wide receiver. So this first clip here is going to be Jeremiah Smith running a 15-yard out route versus a DB who is in head-up press, right? So there's three types of press coverage that we're going to see. We're either going to see a DB who's lined up in head-up press, which essentially means that he's right in front of us, squared up, even with us. He doesn't have a specific leverage. Or what we're going to see is inside leverage, where I guess you could say like the midline of the DB's body is going to be even with our front foot, or even more so to the inside. I've seen that in a lot of cases. Or you'll see outside leverage, where I guess you could say the midline of his body is even with our outside foot. So those are the three types of looks. Now, as a receiver, when it comes down to running routes versus press, the first thing you need to have is a plan off the line of scrimmage. What release am I going to use, and how am I going to work my route at the top of the break? So Jeremiah Smith uses something called a dive release, takes this outside release and is able to win on this out route, get a lot of separation, and catch for this easy toe tap. So let's talk about why he decides to do this and what you can take away from this. So you got to determine the DB's leverage right when you walk up to the line of scrimmage, and that is what tells you what release you're going to be using. So if I'm running an outside breaking route, like an out route, a corner route, a comeback route, even a fade route, and I have a DB who's lined up in head-up press, obviously the release that I would love to take is an outside release. The only time that we want to release inside on outside breaking routes like a corner or an out route is when we absolutely have to, and that's when that DB is lined up outside leverage. So we're going to walk you through three separate plans that you could use versus these three separate press coverage looks. So let's say, for example, the DB's inside shade first, right? He's inside shade for a reason. His goal is to take away the inside route, right? So he doesn't want us to run a slant, doesn't want us to run a post, doesn't want us to run a dig. He's trying to force us to the outside. So if I have to run an outside breaking route, I can't just take off and run. If he's inside shade, I got to give him a move to the inside, attack his leverage, try to get him to hold that leverage, then release outside, and then get up into my route. But I can't just take off and run, because that's exactly what he wants me to do, and he'll force me to the outside. Now, if he's outside leverage over here, the goal would be to not let us run to the outside. So don't let us run an out. Don't let us run a corner. Don't let us run a fade. Force us to the inside where he probably has some type of safety help. So what I'd want to do is I'd want to attack his leverage, make him think I'm going to the outside to move him, take the inside release, and my goal would either be to stack over the top of him where he's trailing behind me, or when I get up to my 15-yard mark, if he's right next to me, I could drop my hips and cut back underneath him and still give the quarterback space to lead me on an out route. If I try to force that outside release versus outside leverage, he's going to get hands, force me to the outside, and I'm not going to have room for the quarterback to lead me. Now, when he's head up, he could be playing head up just to try to disguise what he's doing. Ball snapped, he might jump to the inside. Ball snapped, he might jump to the outside, or he might stay. So my game plan is I'm going to attack him to the inside, try to move him off that platform, and take the easiest path, which would be the outside release versus head-up press. So Jeremiah Smith uses something called a dive release. A dive release, we're essentially trying to sell a drag route. So when he comes off the ball, he takes two hard steps. That's the key. See how he kind of takes this little like prep step with his front foot? It's almost like you pivot off of your front foot, and the first step needs to be a fast step. You're crossing this DB's face, your hips, your shoulders, your eyes, and then the second step need to all be saying that, hey, I'm running a drag route and I'm going to the inside right now to move the DB off that platform. So he puts the brakes on, and you see how he gets skinny, which essentially means he's trying to run as vertical as he can and as close to this DB as he can. You want to try to get right past his hip as close as you can. Obviously, if we get this much separation, you don't need to run to the inside. But Jeremiah Smith pushes vertical, breaks on this route, and gives that quarterback plenty of room. So guys, if you want to be a better route runner, if you struggle versus press, you need to make sure that you have a plan off the line of scrimmage. So this is a great example of a dive release into a 15-yard out from Jeremiah Smith. Now, fellas, before we get into the rest of this video, if you're a wide receiver or even a quarterback watching this video and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we are going to be traveling out to 15 different cities across the entire country, you guys, for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. So if you go to that very first link in the description below, that is where you can sign up to train with us. We started promoting our camps maybe about a month ago, and spots are filling up, you guys. And all of our camps last year, we did 15 last year, sold out probably 3 months in advance. Our spots are starting to fill up. So make sure you take advantage of the fact that we have available spots, because we'd love to have you out to one of our camps. Our next camp is going to be in San Francisco. Then we'll be heading out to Orlando, Phoenix, Columbia, South Carolina, Seattle, Oklahoma City, Nashville, Milwaukee, Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Denver, Colorado, Columbus, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts, Salt Lake City, and finishing it off in Los Angeles, California. So guys, very first link in that description below is where you could sign up, where you could get all the information, what we'll be covering at the camps. Our camps are specifically for development. development. We limit spots simply because we could have you guys in a small group setting so we could work with each of you individually, give you the proper coaching, give you the proper rest, because that's how you ultimately develop. Nobody gets better when it's a million people out there and there's no actual coaching. Our job is to develop you, and that's what we focus on at our camp. So fellas, very first link in that description below, that's where you can sign up. Let's get back to this video. Now, this next clip here is from Jameson Williams running like kind of a deeper hitch route. Some people might call this a stop route, which is essentially where you burst up 10 to 12 yards. You just put the brakes on and the ball's supposed to be right there. Now, this is a route where you have to drop your hips. And so many wide receivers struggle with dropping their hips because they don't focus on really two things. Now, I'm going to play this full speed and then we'll break it down. So Williams releases to the outside and he has that violent drop of his hips. That is the key. That's how you get separation versus talented DBs. Regardless of what you say about, whatever NFL DB that you see on the TV, they're all disciplined, they're all fast, they all have great technique. They wouldn't have those things and be able to play at that level. So to be able to get separation versus a DB of this caliber, you can't have any wasted time at the top of the break. I'm not a guy who focuses a ton on steps. I'm more so focused on not wasting any time. So on a route like a stop route, a hitch route, anything where you got to drop your hips, really any route, even routes where you don't have to drop your hips, like a post or a corner where you cut off a 1 foot, what route are we trying to sell? We're trying to sell a fade. And my goal is to get this DB to do something called open up the gate. I want his hips facing the opposite end zone, right? I don't want him square like this. I want him fully open because that makes it harder for him to react. So I have to sell vertical. And there's 3 things that go into selling vertical. I got to run hard, obviously. I got to have good pad level, which means a slight forward lean. I tell my receivers all the time, pretend like you have one of those like sleds attached to you for like speed training. Act like you're pulling a sled. You're probably going to have a slight lean forward with your chest if you're pulling that sled. And then your stride's got to be the same. It doesn't necessarily need to mean you need long strides, like you're overextending. What you need to do is you need to have the same strides. There is no change in the frequency of your speed, body language, or strides. And frequency means, like, I guess you could say the speed of it. You don't need to run like 100% all out, but it's got to be the same speed, like 90% going into the break. Now, it's very hard to change direction like that. How we change direction like that is that violent drop of my hips, because a lot of receivers will run like this. They'll get the DB to open up his hips, but when they drop their hips, it's a very slow sink of their hips. A lot of old school receiver coaches used to teach the method of you want to beat the drum with your hands. Like you want your hands moving as fast as you can, take a bunch of steps, and that's how you slow down. Versus a talented DB, that's not going to work because he's going to see those hips start to drop. It's going to be slow, and he's going to have more time to react. You got to think you're shooting your hips down as quickly as you possibly can. I tell guys, like, pretend like you're playing musical chairs. The music stops and you drop. And the magic position that you want to drop to is 90 degrees with your legs. You almost want to think your chin is going straight down to your knee. A lot of guys will drop to 90 degrees, very violent, but they'll be almost leaning back. They'll be on their heels, and that makes their break slow because when you're on your heel, that's the slowest part of your foot. You don't run on your heel because it will slow you down, so you definitely don't want to cut on your heel. Your whole foot can touch the ground like you see here, but you need to make sure that the weight is distributed on the ball of your foot when you drop violently. Pretend there's a string attached to your chin. Somebody pulled the string straight down to your knee because that violent drop not only doesn't give the DB time to react, it will make the break faster and it will allow us to stop while selling vertical. If you could sell vertical and drop on a dime, that is very, very hard to stop. And that violent drop is how we do that. Now, there are other little intricacies that can get you out of the break a little bit faster in terms of step placement, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Now, this is a clip from a while back. This is Richie James. He's going to be running a 15 back to 12-yard comeback, and I want you guys to pay attention to, obviously, the drop of his hips. It's very, very similar to the Jameson Williams clip. A little bit longer of a route. This might actually be an 18-yard comeback, actually, 18 back to 15 or 18 back to 16, depending on how you guys run it. But I want you guys to pay attention to the second and third step out of his break, because that's what can eliminate even more wasted time at the break. A lot of receivers, what they'll do is they'll run up into the break, they'll have that violent drop, but their step placement after that is not, I guess you could say, in an efficient spot. So they'll drop, but then they end up taking a million steps to get their hips out of the break. And again, that gives a talented DB time to react. So let's play this thing full speed, then we'll break it down. So push and vertical, drop. But you see how he's able to get out of this thing in probably about 3 to 4 steps. Again, I'm not a steps guy. A lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll focus too much on steps. Going into the break, they'll slow down because they're thinking too much about steps. And as soon as you slow down, DB knows a break's coming, and he'll be all over that route. regardless of the amount of steps that you take. We have to have that same frequency of your speed, of your stride, and your body language, then we drop. So let's talk about this. So see how he drops, so he's pushing vertical, drops on his inside foot. You see how low he gets, 90 degrees, similar to the Jameson Williams clip. Chin to knee, it's very violent. That's what we need to do. But pay attention to his second step. So if I'm dropping on my inside foot and I'm running a comeback, your second step should be with this outside foot, right? And so this outside foot needs to pivot almost at a 45-degree angle. The reason why you want to pivot on that second step is because that starts the process of your hips turning. You don't want to turn your body before you actually snap down. That's what a lot of receivers will do. Right before they snap, they start to turn their hips, they snap down, but as soon as that DB keys in on your hips turning, he can undercut the route, or at least he has an opportunity to, because he's starting to guess. DBs are playing a guessing game, but if we don't give them the opportunity to guess, we don't give them that extra advantage by giving away my route too early with my hips, and we let my feet do it, that could get me more separation. So again, you snap down, second step pivots, so that will naturally make your third step hook around at a 45-degree, and guess what you do off of that third step? You can push off of it, right? And then that gets you out of the break. So now you're eliminating wasted steps at the top, wasted time at the top, and you see the separation that we get. So fellas, it's more than just selling vertical and snapping down. On a route like a 5-yard hitch or like a 10-yard stop, you don't necessarily need to worry about this because you're just stopping. But if you're running a route like a dig, or you're running a route like an out route where you have to drop your hips, or a curl or a comeback where you got to get out of the break and the quarterback is leading you, those extra steps and you being able to drive out of the break are important. So let's play this thing again full speed. So guys, if you're trying to get out of your curls, your 45 degrees, curls and comebacks a little faster, after you snap down, you need to pivot and hook to get your hips out of it. So now let's talk a little bit more about press releases. So when facing like a patient DB, a little bit more talented of a DB, the key as a wide receiver is, yes, you need to have a plan, but your plan of action needs to look very, very similar to other releases that you do. I call that pairing releases together. So this wide receiver is running a simple route. He's running just like a simple back of the pylon, goal line fade. He's on the 10-yard line, but pay attention to the release that he does. He comes off the ball, he slides, gives a jab to the inside, and then he's able to get this DB by a step and win over the top. So let's talk about this. Right? So how many times have you seen a wide receiver, let's talk about this, because I'm always a firm believer that your slant route should look a lot like your fade route, to a T for the most part, right? So if you have a guy who's inside shade and you want to run a slant, something you could do is you could do something called the slide release. So that's where you slide to the outside, you kind of slow down the tempo, and then what you do, or the goal at least, is to get that DB to open up his hips and think that it's a fade. You put the brakes on. Maybe you do like a little crossover, right? Maybe you do like a one off of this foot, break off of the second foot, and then cut underneath them on a slant. You make it look like that. So we want to make our fade look similar to that, to really honestly get in this DB's head, to keep him guessing. What is he doing? Is he running the fade? Is he running the slant? You've done it a couple times. Maybe you do it when you're not getting the ball in your backside, just to get into his head. This is what all the best wide receivers are able to do. How many times have you seen Davante Adams? Probably arguably the best receiver ever when it comes to press releases. He comes off the ball and he'll skip. DB jumps, bam, runs a slant. He'll come off the ball, he'll skip, and then he just takes off and goes. And that DB doesn't know if the slant's coming or the fade is coming. So the plan that you have off the ball is something that you guys can add, or I guess you say the plan that you have off the ball could be built off of releases that all look similar. Like they could take, for example, that clip we saw with Jeremiah Smith. What was that release he did? He did a dive release, right? So maybe when he's actually running a drag, what he does is he does that dive release, and then he throws a little jab back to the outside to hold the DB, make him think he's going back outside. Then he continues on his drag, right? So it's all about being deceptive. It's all about making things look the exact same. So this receiver slides, it's the same tempo, gives a jab inside. All we need is a step. If you have a talented quarterback, all you need is a step, and that's an easy completion for him over the shoulder.